A diplomatic row over the detention of a U.S. citizen has heightened tensions between Turkey and the U.S. and sent the value of the Turkish lira sharply downward. Donald Trump has doubled tariffs on steel and aluminum in an effort to force the release of Andrew Brunson, an American pastor arrested in 2016 after the attempted coup in Turkey. But the situation is indicative of deeper disagreements between the two countries and of the underlying concerns about the Turkish economy. To talk about these and much more, I'm happy to be joined in the studio by Professor Zhou Rong, senior researcher of the Chongyang Institute of Finance at Renmin University, and Anar Tangen, our current affairs commentator. We'll also be talking by satellite to Serkan Oral, a political analyst and writer in Turkey. That's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Zoe. Before we get started, let's take a look at this.
The Turkish lira fell as much as 18% against the US dollar on Friday, hitting an all-time low of 6.3. To make matters worse, Trump vowed to double metal tariffs on Turkey, raising them to 20% on aluminum and 50% on steel. Erdogan called on Turks to make it their patriotic duty to buy the lira.
If there is anyone who has dollars, euros, or gold under their pillows, they should go exchange it for liras at our banks. This is a national domestic battle. This will be my people's response to those who have waged an economic war against us.
In fact, the lira has lost more than 35% of its value since January. Investors are rattled by President Erdogan's influence over the monetary policy. Erdogan's government announced a new economic model which stresses the independence of the central bank.
The absolute independence of this specific monetary policy going forward. Because when you look at the whole framework, the central bank's independence is critically fundamental regarding our economy.
At the center of the row is American pastor Andrew Brunson, who's been held in Turkey on terrorism charges for 2 years. Washington claims there's no evidence against Brunson, and after talks failed in July, Trump threatened sanctions. And the tensions go far beyond the two countries. Turkey is economically linked to the European Union. The euro slipped to its lowest since July 2017. The dollar rose as exposure to Turkey could affect European banks and spark a domino effect. Natalie Pang, CGTN.
So what exactly is going on in Turkey? Anar, I want to ask you, what is going on between the relationship Turkey and the U.S.? Because when Donald Trump came into office, he seemed to pretty much admire President Erdogan. He said he's a strong leader. But why there is such a dispute at this moment? What happened?
Well, there's a number of reasons. The Brunson thing, I think, is something that's a catalyst, a spark, but the powder was already there. Part of it is the way that Turkey is behaving with the EU, and it's not that Donald Trump is sticking up for them, but they're a key link in the anti-ISI fight. So it's very important for them to be there. They've signaled a lot of independence. They've also been leaning closer to China and Russia. And I think this is Trump's way of saying, listen, you know, you're a small country, you're less than 1% of the world's GDP. If you try to defy the United States, it's going to go very, very badly for you. So this is more playground bully tactics, making sure that everyone knows who's in charge and who can deliver the most pain.
And Mr. Zhou, you agree that this is just not about an American Christian pastor being detained in Turkey?
I think I agree to Excellency your point of view, but I wanted to just make some additions. I think one of the some other reasons is one is Turkey does not have very good relations with Israel. Turkey openly support the Brotherhood as well as Hamas. And Turkey has a special relation with Iran, is against the U.S. attempts on the new sanction of Iran. So as my partner mentioned, that is Turkey established a special relationship with Russia, which almost all the NATO countries against Russia.
But is Turkey turning east or rallying up with Russia and Iran something that posed a geopolitical threat to the United States? That's why the Trump administration has become more hostile to President Erdogan.
Well, Turkey's going its own way. There are questions about the election from the Western side. There's really just questions of where he's going. And the irony is that he's very much like Trump. He's somebody who's very populist. He will say what is necessary. He pursues this growth at any cost. There's a lot of debt in Turkey, and the question is, how do you pay it back, especially with interest rates rising in the U.S. Many of these private companies and the government itself are indebted. 40%, the private companies are indebted to 40% of the GDP, of their total output on a yearly basis. So they're carrying heavy debt loads, and those debt loads are growing. At the same time, you have Forex moving out of the country. And the reason is, right now you can get almost 3% on 10-year U.S. Treasuries. With inflation at 15%, with bank loans at 17.75%, you know, a lot of people within Turkey are fleeing. They're looking for something a little bit safer, and this is what he has this kind of double whammy. So he needs to find somebody with a deep pocket who can help him kind of weather this storm, and I think he's eyeing China.
And Russia and China will be picking up the tabs? You think that will prop up the economic woes in Turkey?
Well, Turkey and Russia had their moments too a little earlier on, and I think that was part of the reason that, you know, things have changed, because they've since then grown a lot closer, created a more special relationship, as my colleague has indicated. So, I mean, Trump does, he admires somebody who's strong, but he does not admire somebody who he perceives as going against his or what he perceives are America's best interests.
So, is it in the interest of Turkey to really cozying up to Russia strategically and economically to China? And is it feasible?
Let's say it this way. The first Trump and Erdogan used to be very intimate. Even 1 month ago, Trump used to just...
but before that, they had a fight over a fighter shoot-down on the border.
For Russia, that is between Turkey, is something like what you said. But currently, the major source of direct investment come from Europe, not from America, not from China. Europe just take about 72% of direct investment in Turkey, but America only 7%, China only 1.1%. So I can hardly say that they can just use Russia and China to replace the position of America in Turkey. But if they choose Europe, they will depend more on Europe. They will maintain a very good relation with England, Germany, and France. And because of the transfer of technology, of course they need China not only for finance, and of course China's financial resources will be more welcome in Ankara. But more important, they still hope to maintain a good relations with Europe because of the technology transfer.
Before we analyzing the economic aspects of this, the political dimensions, some say that the Trump administration is basically playing politics here, because Brunson, the pastor, is an evangelical Christian pastor, and there's a cause in the United States before the midterm elections to rallying up the base. That is, of course, evangelicals. That's why they play up the issue to Turkey. Do you agree?
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, it's never one pure thing. All right, it fits his agenda right now to be really being very strong and very tough with Turkey, especially on this issue. But there are all the other issues that we talked about politically in terms of the relationships, the fact that Erdogan is going alone, that he isn't in step with the Israel policy, that he's making friends with Iran, that he's turning more increasingly and threatening to turn more to the east, where there are more markets. Now, we'll get into the financial in a second.
But does it make sense for Turkey to behave in this way? That is, more divergent policies with the U.S. in terms of local politics? Yes?
Yeah. I think Turkey used to be obedient before, but they did not get what they wanted. So right now they wanted to just take the harsh position, because for that case they may gain something.
What did they gain?
They think that is American finally will compromise, not just like as harsh as...
By being tough
by being
against
tough,
the
you
US?
see. So because we all know that it's American policy towards North Korea as well as towards Iran. It's very changeable. America not only just adjusts its policy towards the enemy, but also adjusts its policy towards all the allies. Even to Japan and to Europe, they do almost the same things.
Okay.
So Turkey may find some space for themselves in the future.
Let's get some perspective from Mr. Oral. So, Mr. Oral, we've been talking about why Turkey has been more anti-America in recent years. Does it align with its geopolitical interests?
Let me clear that Turkey is disappointed with U.S. tensions, especially Mr. Trump's threatened policies shows that the U.S. is losing its grip on the political way. Turkey and Turkish policies are not against United States, but there are huge differences on these regional questions. Especially Turkey is not applying the U.S. policies in the region, and without Turkey you cannot apply U.S. policies in the region, especially Iraq issue, Syrian issue, and these are the border countries with Turkey and Turkey's backyards. The second thing, of course, the U.S. Putting pressure on Turkey is the S-400 missiles issue. Turkey will buy S-400 missiles from Russia, and the U.S. and NATO allies don't accept this. Turkey tries to operate domestic policies, and it seems that this is not acceptable from allies. Nearly 6 debates, we can say that 6 decades, Turkey and US are strategic partners and NATO allies. But with the Pastor Brunson issue, the things are changing quickly. Especially Turks are seeing this currency pressure as an economic war, and President Erdogan says that they are seeing the game and they will challenge it. But so it seems that Erdogan will go head-to-head to Trump, and according to the US policies, with the Twitter account, it's a cheap diplomatic policies. I think somebody like Kissinger, they need in a really realistic diplomatic things to do, but it seems that Turkey is not involved. The issues like Iraq, Iran, Syria issues, same parallel to the American policies, but don't forget US is in a war with everyone except Israel.
Let's come back to our studio discussions. Well, Turkey is a NATO member. It's supposed to be an ally of the United States. Shouldn't they coordinate their policies better and become this kind of a divergent on many fronts?
Well, you have to take these things a little bit separately. First off, foreign policy is foreign policy. NATO is a defense treaty. It does not say that you have to coordinate your foreign policy. Now, the SS-400 missiles from Russia, that is a little bit more worrisome on a technical perspective, because you're going to have Russian technicians who are going to be coming in and repairing and taking care and training those missiles. The question is, are they going to be next to U.S. missiles where they can take a look at the U.S. hardware, and vice versa? I would think the Russians would have the same issue. Now, this issue is also playing out in India, where India is doing almost exactly the same thing. And I don't know if they've gotten an official buy, but the people I've talked to on the Indian side believe they'll get it.
These may be technical issues, but it point to a strategic direction that Turkey and the U.S. are not on the same page any longer.
Well, the U.S. is not on the same page, and I'm going to agree with my colleague, with many international governments right now. They're not in favor of the UN, they're not in favor of WTO, they're not in favor of the EU, they're not in favor of TPP, they're not in favor of the Belt and Road, they're not in favor of RCEP. In fact, they're not in favor of even dealing with their neighbors on NAFTA. So right now, the U.S. is rejecting the world regime that was created, that it helped create post-World War II.
So you blame America for deteriorating relations between
I'm saying that America is changing the game, and as a
Okay.
result, you're starting to see people engage in real politic, which is just trying to balance these different powers and get as much as they can.
And Mr. Joe,
Yeah.
how bad do you think the relationship between Turkey and the U.S. will go?
Yeah.
Will Turkey someday say to the Americans, if you don't cooperate with us, we will probably shut down our air base that the Americans have been using?
No, I don't think so. First, Turkey, at least in the near future, may not withdraw from NATO. Secondly, but Turkey may not be very intimate ally of NATO. That will be very alienate ally. So that is to say, some other military exercises against Russia, Turkey may not join in. This is very important. And also in the future, Turkey would just promise that you would like you to diplomacy as well as dialogue to talk with America. Of course, they need a middleman between them. But I don't really think Turkey tried to make the relationship worse and worse. No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Even the United States may not do the same things.
Okay, we'll talk about the economic and financial side of the recent row. You're watching Dialogue here on CGTN. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Let's talk about the depreciation of Lira in Turkey. President Erdogan said this is an operation against Turkey's economy. It's not, has nothing to do with the economic foundation in Turkey. Can he justify this like this way?
No, I don't think so. There's clearly some problems with the debt structure, and they're going to be facing issues in terms of repayment of the kind of foreign loans that they have. That was a given before this. The fact that the U.S. is choosing to double down on this at this time is really, it seems more political than anything else. All the issues we talked about on that side, making Brunson in terms of using him for a campaign factor, appearing tough and sending a strong message that if you mess with Donald Trump, it won't go well for you.
So how serious is this currency issue for Turkey? It will develop into an economic crisis in the future.
I can hardly say that, but one thing is clear. That will make Turkey much more difficult to just borrow from European banks, because right now European bank, that force European bank just to give the more expensive write off, because this is very important for Turkey, because most of the money they borrowed come from the European banks. But I don't really think that will influence the current Turkish common people's life so much, because right now
the inflation rate has already been over 10%.
Inflation is of 10%, but they still can just export to Iran and to Russia. Take one thing, for example, people do not know when there's a crisis, oil crisis a couple of years ago, Iran just export a lot of oil to Turkish market, of course, through a smuggling way, not through the normal.
But that will further aggravate the U.S. because the U.S. insisted all those countries doing businesses around
they will
be
continue.
punished.
Because you see, within even the Ottoman Empire, you see, between Turkey and Iran, there's no war. 400 years, no war. So I think Turkey's economic ties with Iran will continue and will be stronger than ever before.
Okay. And what is the most vulnerable part of Turkey's economy, and how resilient it is, can withstand the pressure it is facing now?
Well, it's debts. The private debts and the governmental debts. I mean, there's been a lot of spending. The infrastructure has been improved, and the economy has actually been growing quite well. But the problem has been this inflation, the very high interest rates. But keep in mind, this is classic Trump. He's shooting at Erdogan. But if you start looking,
moment.
Well, that's part, but he's hitting a lot of other people. The euro has gone down over 1.2% on Friday and more today because they have so much exposure there. You're seeing it in the South African rand. You're seeing it in the Mexican peso.
All the emerging markets have been seeing similar problems.
No,
because
it's directly tied to Turkey because all of their banks have exposure
to
in there.
The Turkish assets.
The major Turkish banks were bought into by the European side, by France, by Spain, by Italy. So they're all facing exposure. That's why it's going down. So it's it shows the interconnectedness of the global supply chain and world, that you can't just think that you're shooting at some guy and you're hurting them. He's hurting a lot of other people. So right now the formula is they need a stopgap, something to get the lira back on track. They need some sort of financial support. I think they'll be going to China for that.
I'd like to talk, Mr. Oral, once again about what will be the remedy for the current malaise. What do you think the Turkish banking regulators can do to salvage your finances?
Starting from the Turkish economic authorities, they are putting special operations on the banking issues to balance the Turkish currency, but it seems it is not enough these days until this political tension will get down. But let's talk on about especially the domino effect. Turkey is the border of the EU zone, and Turkey is the 17th powerful economy in the world, and the economy is not fragile. But if you look to the Greece, Ireland, Bulgaria, France, this economic crisis will be an important shadow on the EU zone economy. But strategically, if this US tension will grow more, and Turkey will search for new partners, new markets, and new allies, so this will be especially Russia and China. Turkish people sees that China is the biggest economy in the world, and also Tayyip Erdogan's, President Erdogan's son-in-law, managing the economic issues. He is especially spotlight on China's investment coming in the near future to Turkey. So starting with the trade, the local currencies like euro, ruble or yuan, then this will be the first step, and second will be selling the gold and the dollars in the hand of the Turkish people and buying Turkish liras. But it will not affect too many, but this will be a solidarity, it seems. And the second, diplomatically, we hope that this Pastor Brunson issue will be solved in a diplomatic way, and US and Trump, especially supported by the evangelists, leading by the Vice President Pence, and Jewish lobbies will understand that Turkey is an important partner in the region, and then the tension will get down, and the economical turbulence will end.
And Mr. Oral, talk about new partners and new friends. Who will they be? Russia and China?
Not only Russia and China, but also India and Japan and South Korea. They will be the new partner.
Maybe the Gulf countries as well?
Gulf country.
Qatar?
Qatar is important, but Saudi Arabia may not be. They used to be allied, but because of the differences on Iran issue, Saudi Arabia is not as intimate as before with Turkey.
Why hasn't Turkey turned to the IMF, which is the traditional way of solving solvency issue?
Well, it take a lot of control. I mean, the economy is in a difficult position. The IMF would come in with the usual package, which says hike interest rates, austerity, cut jobs. It would be very, very anti-populist, if you know what I mean. It would not go well with the people to start having these massive cuts. What they need is more jobs there and things like this. Hearing that people are going to get laid off, pensions are going to be cut, the types of things that have, basically beset Greece. This would not be popular at all. And I don't think Erdogan would fare very well. There could be a lot of unrest and things like that in that area. So he's not going to be anxious to impress the IMF. As my colleague pointed out, this is really a lot of exposure by Europe. All right. So
what are the options of the Europeans? They have exposures to the assets which are problematic.
Well,
what can they do? Inject more blood?
Well, they can, but they can't do it very quickly. They're not going to be running out and throwing what could be perceived as good money after bad, especially with the situation in Greece. All right, so you have, the Germans are not as much exposed in this as the French, Italians, and Spanish. So the question is, it's going to be individualized. It's not going to be an EU program.
Okay.
But they need somebody to stand up and basically halt the slide of the lira, get it stabilized, and then try to work something out with the EU.
The other partners will inject blood into the financial system in Turkey. What will they ask in return? For example, Russia, China, Japan.
I think number one is China. It's not Japan, not Russia, because Turkey is just seeking some credit line for their private and
do you think China will say yes to this?
China may have a deep discussion with them to discuss something about the terms, about the conditions for the credit line.
What do you think are the likely terms?
I think that is China will support Turkey. Because on the regard of the Europe, I also agree to my partner's point of view. That is one thing that Europe can decline American demands on sanctioning again towards Iran. Europe can also decline American demands on certain kind of things, sanction against Turkey. So I think the future may not be pessimistic, maybe a little bit positive.
So that means China will be more closely linked with the Turkish economy.
Yes. And also, tourism is one thing. And another thing we all know that last year only 239,000 people visited Turkey, and in the future there will be more. Not only one thing, but also Chinese shipping company, copper company, also stationed in Turkey. 2 Chinese banks are very active in Turkey. So in the future, I think the relation between Turkey and China economically will be very, very intimate and very expensive.
And how long do you think this will unwind and Turkey's problem will go away or at least lessen?
Well, I think it's going to be a balancing act. I agree with you. They're not going to. The U.S. can't afford to
lose an ally like Turkey.
Well, not only ally, an air base. That is a very strategic one, very used a lot, especially in all operations in the Middle East. And we're still very active in Afghanistan and all these places. So it's still needed. But I think Turkey is going to turn economically towards a Belt and Road, towards China, towards something that gives them a little bit more daylight in terms of an economic future. They really don't see it here. Erdogan obviously is a very strongman politician. He is politically, he cannot be seen to be bowing to Donald Trump.
And and through almost last 70 years, United States, whatever they are doing, they have been doing, they never lose one ally. But this time, if they lose ally, the whole American people may not be happy with Trump.
We don't know what will happen under President Trump's stewardship. Well, thank you very much, NR, and thank you, Mr. Zhou. You've been watching Dialogue here on CGTN. Thanks for watching. Goodbye for now.